What's up, everyone? It's another week of the Force with Friends podcast. Now, this week, I thought it would be fun to take a look at the future of Star Wars. So, what we have coming that we know of, but also maybe what I would do over the next 5, 10 years and beyond. So, that's where we're going today. First thing, though, as you can see, no Kevin here. I hate to inform you, but we had a huge falling out over the weekend, and he's no longer going to be on the show. That's just a joke. I'm sure a lot of people just turned it off at that point. But no, Kevin's busy this week, and so going solo today. So the Force with Friends will be me and the audience that I consider my friends. So looking to the future of Star Wars. I think that's a very Star Warsy thing, right? Looking to the horizon, looking to the future. We have quite a bit of Star Wars stuff already confirmed going forward. Just this year, we have Skeleton Crew still coming out at Christmas. We have Andor coming out in 2025. I want to say the date on that is early 2025, if I've read that correctly. I'm sure it'll be the first half of the year, for sure within the next year. We'll have Andor Season 2. Beyond that, as far as live action series goes, Ahsoka's a good little ways away. Like, they're not filming Season 2 of Ahsoka until next summer. So, I mean, I would say at least a year on top of that, maybe longer. Not sure exactly how that works for a TV show. I know it can probably be a little bit quicker than movies, but I would say you're looking at summer 2026 at the absolute earliest. Could be later in that year. Could even be 2027. We got a little while for that one, if all of that reporting is actually true. No reason to believe it's not. One of the actresses said that, I'm pretty sure. The Sabine Wren actress, Natasha Liu Bordizzo, I believe she's the one who actually said that. So it's on her calendar. It's probably right. So that is Ahsoka Season 2. For The Mandalorian, there's kind of some debate on what on earth is going on there. We know there's a Mandalorian movie in 2026, I believe, like May of 2026. I think that's the date. So you've got that coming. That's going to be a big summer blockbuster. And the debate there is kind of whether or not the Mandalorian movie is going to be like replacing the Mandalorian season 4. Will there be a season 4 before it? Will there be a season 4 after? Will we even have the Mandalorian after the movie? Who knows? All we know is the Mandalorian and Grogu movie is coming in 2026. And so those are all confirmed. Now I'm going to pull up this chart here for us. You can kind of see this timeline. So this was shown at Star Wars Celebration. If it wasn't last year, it was the year or 2 years before that. There wasn't one last year. So it was the most previous celebration. So a couple years ago. So we've got, the stuff that we're familiar with. We have the Fall of the Jedi, which being the prequels. We have the Rise of the Empire being the original trilogy. We have the Age of Rebellion being in that original trilogy time period as well. But on either side of that, we'll go, in the past first. We have the Dawn of the Jedi, the Old Republic, which most hardcore Star Wars fans are familiar with. Then you have the High Republic, which has, for the most part, been fleshed out in books, comics, and most recently the Acolyte. So we know there's no more on-screen plans for that, at least in the near future. That wasn't necessarily well received. On the other side, though, we have the New Republic being our Mandalorian, Ahsoka timeline. I don't think we have any more live action. I suppose Skeleton Crew will be in this time period. We have the Rise of the First Order being our sequel trilogy, and then we have the New Jedi Order being the Rey movie that's coming. So that's something we'll talk about in a little bit. But then back to that Dawn of the Jedi, there's a movie for that as well. There's a movie planned for the New Republic being the Mandalorian movie. So that's kind of Star Wars in a nutshell, what we have at this point, kind of where we are and where we're going officially. But what would I necessarily do with this timeline? So that's kind of the theme of this video. So looking at what we have, what we've got planned, but also where I would go with it just as my wish list. Not that it matters one way or the other. I almost assure you that my wish list is not what's going to happen. But as a fan, we all kind of have our wish list for what we would like to see Star Wars do in the direction that it should take going forward. So just before we get into anything, definitely drop in the comments where you would like to see Star Wars go. I'll take a look at those later on and respond as I can, but I'm going to break this down really into three tiers. I considered going by timeline order, but that didn't seem as streamlined for me. So the way I'm going to break this down, and I have some notes here to kind of keep me honest, but I'm going to break it down into what I would like to see us do. I say us, what I would like to see Star Wars do in the animated shows, also in live action series, and then finally where I think the movies, what direction their strategy should go. So I do have some timeline ideas that I would certainly like, but the strategy is the big idea really for all three of these, at least my preference. Now, not going to be your preference necessarily, almost again, certainly not going to be the preference of Disney, Lucasfilm. They're the ones spending the money and making things. We're just the consumers, but we all have opinions and what we would like to see. So let's kick it off with the animation. So, what would I like to see Star Wars do in animation? I'm pretty sure at this point we don't have any animated Star Wars confirmed going forward. We just wrapped up the Bad Batch. Now, there's some loose ends there, which we'll touch on, but I think we've always kind of had something on the horizon for animation, at least for the last, 3-4 years between final season of the Clone Wars, Tales of the Jedi, Tales of the Empire, the Bad Batch. We've had all this going on for a few years, and now I think the only thing we can necessarily count on is another Tales series. Those seem to be pretty well received, and they're short stories. I don't make animated films, but I'm sure as far as making content, making a very short series of short stories that are animated, probably a little bit easier than pulling off a live action series. So I would assume we keep getting those every year. But what I would do if I were in charge of the animation, which, by the way, let's just throw it out there, the animated Star Wars rarely misses. So, love Star Wars under Disney, hate Star Wars under Disney. I know there's a lot of people in both camps, and then some people, I like to consider myself in this middle group that enjoys some of it, doesn't necessarily enjoy other parts of it, and I'll kind of tell you like it is, what I do and don't like. But I don't think the animated series have been missing that often. So the story as a whole, so Star Wars Rebels, very good, right? The Clone Wars, that final season of the Clone Wars, very good. You look at the Bad Batch story as a whole. Now, I say as a whole because I have not rewatched any of season 2 outside of like the first episode and then the last few episodes. All that kind of in the middle, didn't care for it so much, but the Bad Batch story as a whole, now that we've seen it all, I think it's pretty good. So, animation, doing pretty well. Tales of the Jedi, probably the best animated Star Wars we have. Tales of the Empire, not so much. You appreciate that they, kind of tried to go in a direction of stories that we don't know about yet, but the stories we got this go around just weren't for me. Whatever, if you did like it, that's great. If you didn't, that's great too. But again, animated for the most part has been pretty good. So, if I were in charge of animation, what would I do? Well, this timeline that they've been exploring lately, so you've got the Bad Batch, the Tales of the Empire, Star Wars Rebels, That's all in that episode 3, like post Order 66, all the way, before A New Hope, before episode 4. I think that's a very good timeline to keep exploring. We've got a 20-year gap there that is pretty interesting. You've got Darth Vader and the Emperor. You've got this budding rebellion that's coming about. So I think that's very interesting if that continues to get explored. So timeline we're talking about here, in between that fall of the Jedi, reign of the Empire, age of rebellion, I'm looking at filling in that little, those time periods on either side there of the reign of the Empire. That's what I want to see the animation explore. So you could have like an Inquisitor story in animation. They really turned Kenobi into an Inquisitor story, at least half of it. That didn't quite land right for me because I didn't show up to watch an Inquisitor show. I showed up to watch a Kenobi show. So doesn't mean I'm not interested in an Inquisitor show. Just time and place wasn't there. So let's say we go and we do an Inquisitor show in this time frame. Maybe it's a little bit darker of an animated series. Not that it's, like rated, R or M or whatever you want to call it, but, you know, Inquisitors going out hunting Jedi. Maybe make it a Darth Vader series. Maybe you have like Vader and the Inquisitors, and you can maybe tie in some Fallen Order stuff. Jedi Survivor, that's going on right now. So, I think that would be interesting to see. I think a lot of people would enjoy that for sure. And you don't necessarily have like this, I don't know if you want to call it like you already know what's going to happen because eventually, we know what happens in the original trilogy. So that's set in stone. It's not going to change. But if you have these Inquisitors just kind of off doing these other maybe non-consequential missions, like we know they're just going around and hunting Jedi. Like, yeah, it's important, I suppose, to the story that there aren't any Jedi essentially other than Luke when we get to the original trilogy, or other than Obi-Wan and Yoda trying to train Luke. There's Ezra Bridger as well, and Ahsoka's out there too, but she's no Jedi, right? So I think it would be very easy to hop into this series. Probably low expectations, just kind of a series out there on its own, still filling in some gaps though that we don't have. You could kind of get some background on the Empire, how it works, throw in Palpatine here and there, throw in Vader here and there, give them some challenges maybe. Maybe you throw in like a Quinlan or a Saj or something like that. Leave Obi-Wan out of it, maybe you can have Ezra in it again. Like, just keep this Inquisitor story rolling. It would be maybe low-hanging fruit, which I think we would enjoy. So that would be cool. You've got this idea after seeing the Bad Batch finale. So spoilers, if you have not seen it, I'm about to spoil the end of it. But you see the Bad Batch essentially retiring, right? They finally get to ride off into the sunset. But you have Omega joining the rebellion. So maybe you have Omega being a rebel pilot. That would be a cool story to see. An older version of her. Maybe, you have some tie-ins back to the Bad Batch. Maybe they have a few missions left up their sleeve with her. But you could explore the rebellion's fight against the Empire. I think that would be very interesting. Again, something that's already kind of set up there. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if that's something that we end up getting anyways. But again, it's in that time frame that we really only have the original trilogy and a few other projects, so would be pretty cool to explore there. Another thing that they have thrown out is Asajj Ventress, right? She shows up in one episode of The Bad Batch. I think it was just one episode. She shows up. It's not going to be the end of her story because I think Dave Filoni said that. Like, okay, this is Asajj's story, or this is Asajj kind of playing into this story, and it's not the last you're going to see of her, or something like that. They've hinted that we're going to continue that going on. So with her connection with Quinlan Vos from, I forget what the book is even called. I've read it. Either way, whatever that book was with Quinlan and Asajj that was like a borderline love story. Probably was more than a borderline love story. It probably was just a love story, but you kind of have that connection there. Now with Kenobi, Quinlan Voss was mentioned with the Hidden Path, so you could have a Hidden Path story, and I think that really could overlap with an Inquisitor story if you wanted to. So Inquisitors are hunting Jedi. You have this hidden path trying to get force sensitive people away from the Inquisitors. So maybe there's the tension there that you're looking for. I think that would be a smart thing to do. That would just, again, easy story. Doesn't really affect things in episodes 1 through 3 or 4 through 6. And honestly, most Star Wars fans want Star Wars to not be making content that contradicts the original 6 films. This would not do that. It would be like Star Wars Rebels territory, which pretty well received, I would say. So, think that would be interesting. Again, filling in gaps. That's what we're looking for. So, nothing crazy, just time periods that we want to know about in Star Wars that we don't currently know about. Now, this last one that I've written down here, and this one is probably like bucket list Star Wars for me. And I think animation, I mean, it would be really cool to see in live action, but it's not going to happen in live action. Just, it's not possible for it to happen in live action, I don't believe. I don't think they would spend the money to do all these deep fakes, per se. Maybe they would. I don't know. But a Luke, Han, and Leia rebellion story animated in between each film. So you could start this off pre-episode 4. You could have, as much time as you needed pre-episode 4 building up these characters. I don't think they would do that though, because we have Solo is out there, and then we've got kind of bits and pieces of what's going on with Luke and Leia, with Luke and Kenobi. His story can't be that interesting before episode 4. I mean, he's on the farm on Tatooine. There's only so much you can be doing. Leia's has been hashed out a little bit in Kenobi, right? Young Leia. We get her a little bit here and there in Rebels. I think hers could be pretty interesting, just kind of seeing those rebel dynamics with the politics of the Empire. And then, like, you could come up with Han Solo stuff. But I think really where you start picking up is post episode 4. So you have what happens immediately following A New Hope. Lead us up to Empire. Lead us up to Hoth. So get us there. That would be so interesting to see. And I know there's comics out there that have different things about what happened, and they're super cool. But again, Star Wars is best viewed on screen. So, if it, maybe you get rid of the comics as canon, or are you step over the bounds of that. And I know people get really frustrated when there's already literature out there that's canon, and then live action or animated kind of walks all over the canon and the literature. Completely get that, but George Lucas's vision for Star Wars was what was on screen that reigned supreme, if you will. So it took precedent over the other pieces of media that you would have. So video games, even animated shows, books, things like that. What was on screen was what was officially canon. So let's take that. Let's make some new canon, if we will, or bring some of it in, right? Bring influence into it, but give us Luke, Han, and Leia in between episodes 4 and 5. Then jump ahead a season, right? So you get us, maybe it's more than a season, because that's a good time jump. So maybe you have a few seasons between episodes 4 and 5. Then give us a season after episode 5. So give us a little, thing at the end of the last season between 4 and 5, and be like, hey, go watch Empire Strikes Back. That's what's next. Then you watch Empire Strikes Back, and you pick up in the aftermath of Empire Strikes Back. So you've got Luke reeling from losing his hand and fighting Vader, and you've got Leia reeling with Han being frozen in carbonite and having to deal with all the nuts and bolts of the rebellion, if you will. You've got Lando Calrissian getting involved. I think that's super interesting. You could even kind of go to the other side of this, and you have Vader dealing with all these feelings that he has, dealing with the Emperor post his duel with Luke. Now the Vader comics in that time frame are so good. You could just take a lot of that and make it a series. And even though I've read it, I would watch it again. But you could take some ideas from that, take it as it is, and just kind of build up this story. And don't do it in like a stupid way, if you will, to where it's like, I don't know if that really meshes with the story. Tell non super consequential stories so they're fun. They add to the lore. They don't mess with the movies though, right? So they add to it in a good way. They don't take away from what we have or leave these debate points or maybe change the meaning of things. Don't do that, but just give us a story, fill in some gaps. Again, just fun stories that make us enjoy 4, 5, and 6 even more. So you could really fill in probably a few seasons between 4 and 5, a few seasons after 5 and 6, because after that, now you could tell these stories too. I would like to see those as well, but fill in those gaps maybe between, when we see Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian season 2. Fill in the years between episode 6 and when we get to that time period. Now, I have an idea that maybe some of this could get fleshed out on screen. So holding out hope that maybe in a few instances here or there, they do that deep fake thing that they've done with Luke and The Mandalorian, also the Book of Boba Fett. That could happen in live action, but you could kind of fill in the gaps there with the New Republic time frame. Get us to the point that we're kind of telling these live action stories. I don't think anyone would complain about having good stories with Luke, Han, and Leia, even if they are animated. So that would be good. But then the last little time period that I would for sure make sure to expand upon, because it's kind of like malpractice that this hasn't been expanded upon yet. But I would go in and I would go to that New Republic time frame and I would fill in that gap in between the New Republic and the rise of the First Order. So we have a First Order who is out there and they show up in the sequel trilogy in episode 7 and they're doing terrible, horrible things. And we don't really care because it's like, where did this First Order come from? Like, it's kind of explained away in a few sentences. I kind of get that has to happen. Like, in episode 4, we don't know where the Empire came from, right? Like, we just know there's a bad Empire and we know there's a rebellion, and jump ahead 50 years and everyone loves all of it, right? Like, there's this big multi-billion-dollar company out of that. So I get that it can work that way, but eventually they filled in all the gaps for us and we figured out how the Empire came to be. So I think here, what you have to do, and you could do this in like a live action series as well, but I think maybe animated is easier to do this. So maybe you go in animated and you can fill this in with some characters that we may not otherwise see in live action. Like, it would be probably pretty difficult to get Adam Driver to come back as Kylo Ren. That's not really the type of movies he's doing right now. So Adam Driver is probably the best actor that Star Wars has ever had. Not that Kylo Ren is the best character, although I do like Kylo Ren. Adam Driver is probably the best actor. And so I think it would be pretty difficult for him to come back for a live action series. Maybe not, but fill in that gap there. Give us some, Kylo Ren falling to the dark side. Give us Hux and his rise in the First Order in animation. Give us some Snoke in animation. Maybe kind of let us in on the fact that Palpatine, as far as canon goes, is still pulling the strings. Do that in animation. That's not a difficult thing to do. Just give us, and it could be called The Rise of the First Order, like super original, right? We don't know how they rose, so call it The Rise of the First Order or something like that, and just, again, fill in those gaps and then make us like what we got in the sequels a little bit more. Now, there are some people who are never going to like anything about the sequels. That's fine if that's you. There's a lot about the sequels I don't like. Last week, our podcast was only saying nice things about the sequels, and again, that was more so of a therapeutic challenge type thing for us. There's plenty of negative things to say about the sequel trilogy. 9 is my least favorite Star Wars movie, not named Solo. And so I think if you go in and you kind of build up this first order as something that is interesting, but also kind of has some meat to it, right? Like we kind of know how they got there. I think that makes the sequels a little bit more compelling. Are they going to have their own issues? Absolutely, right? You can't undo everything, but you can add story points that make things more interesting. So, for example, if you haven't read Shadows of the Sith, that's the book. It came out a couple summers ago. It's Luke Skywalker and Lando Calrissian, mainly focused on them. And it's in between episodes 6 and 7. So, Luke's kind of in this area of looking for things like artifacts or something along the lines, and he kind of gets pulled into this story of the fact that there's still some Sith stuff going on out there. And then you end up getting him on a hunt for Rey and Rey's parents because someone's looking for her. They know Ochi from episode 9 is looking for her, and you have Lando Calrissian looped in there because his daughter has been abducted and he doesn't know what happened to her. And so it kind of gives you those first order hints, if you will. You get some exegol information there. So, long story short, without rambling too much, if you go in there and you kind of, read that story and it's a fun book, then I can go watch episode 7. I can watch episode 9, which it ties in most closely to. And I understand more. I enjoy it a little bit more than I did before. So, do that with an animated series. Make us enjoy the sequels more. Fill in some gaps that we have no clue about. So that's it for animated. That's what I would do. I would go back to these time frames and I would just fill in the gaps from episode 3 to 6 and then maybe 6 to 7 if you wanted to go that route. Now, looking at live action shows. So this is more so a strategy of what I would do because right now it appears on the surface that they're using live action to supplement the movies or movies to supplement the live action. So like we've got Rogue One spins off to Andor, but Andor is going to end up supplementing Rogue One, right? Rogue One stands alone fine on its own. Andor's good though. I enjoy it. You also have The Mandalorian feeding into this Mandalorian movie. Supposedly Skeleton Crew will also kind of feed into this big story. So what I would do going forward, now you've got your stories that are already established. They're going to be telling them. Probably not a lot of changing you're going to do from that. But for live action series in the future, what I would do is make them not dependent on movies. I wouldn't make the movies dependent on the live action. I would have these live action series coming out. The strategy going forward, reportedly from Lucasfilm, is one live action per year, which I think is a good idea. Let's have these live action shows. Again, I'm not sure how far out we have to get past like Ahsoka or Andor or Mandalorian, stuff like that. Well, Andor's ending. Like this is the last season of Andor. He has an expiration date for sure. Spoiler alert. But you look at like Ahsoka, Mandalorian, Skeleton Crew, all those things. I think it's going to be hard to separate Skeleton Crew and Mandalorian from the movie that they're going to try to tell. So it appears that those are going to kind of stay that way. But Ahsoka does have some potential to go out on its own. They're in a different galaxy. Tell your own story in that galaxy and let that be its own thing. Like let Ahsoka be on Ahsoka Island and have this big Ahsoka story on Peridia. Maybe keep Balin's skull in there. You've got Shin out there. You have the Mortis story out there. Let that be its own thing out in this other galaxy. And the whole purpose of Ahsoka is for her not to let this big dilemma get back to the galaxy that she knows. So throw Force Ghost Anakin in there, keep him going. but let it be its own thing. It doesn't have to do anything with the New Republic movie that they're going to tell. It doesn't have to get you to the sequel, the post sequel movies. Like, just let Ahsoka have her own little Ahsoka verse and let it stay there. Then you can have some other kind of show. You could go, and tell like Vader in between episodes 3 and 4, because you can have, your own whoever in the suit, and you can dub over the voice now, and Vader can tell whatever story you want Vader to tell in between 3 and 4. Although animated probably would make a lot of sense as far as budget goes, but episode 3, episode 4, those are very well established. They don't need a Vader series, and if you throw a Vader series out there, probably doesn't need episode 3 and 4 either. Vader sells. So put it out there. Let it not be reliant on anything else, right? You could do that. You could go in a time period way back. You could go way forward. You could just make some random character in a time period that we have, but it's its own story, and let them just kind of be their own thing, right? Like, we turn on TV shows. If I'm watching The Office, guess what? I'm not watching it to get geared up for the Office movie, right? If I'm watching Lost or something like that, I'm trying to think of long, drawn out shows that I've watched. I'm not looking for a movie at the end of it, or, oh, I wonder how this is going to tie in, right? It's just a show. It's mindless. Throw it on, let it be its own thing, have the movies be their own thing. So if I were doing live action series, I would really, really, really focus on letting them be their own thing. Give us seasons, right? Let it build up, like what The Mandalorian appeared to be doing, which now we're getting a Mando movie. Completely on board with that, by the way. Like, I'm going to go watch it. But kind of what we were thinking The Mandalorian was, and then it started spinning off in a lot of different directions. Give us a show and let it just be a show. Just tell its own story. If there's little spin-offs here and there, that's great, but this doesn't have to be a Marvel-esque type thing where you've got, 117 different stories all converging into one big finale. That's a lot, and that's not necessarily Star Wars. So, again, have your cool shows. Let them just be your cool shows. Now, will that happen? Probably not. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to funnel your content in. As someone who creates content at a very small level, I have an Instagram that I hope funnels people to YouTube, and I hope YouTube funnels people back around to Instagram. So I don't really have many others, but like, some people use 6 types of social media to all keep funneling back to yourself. So I get that. That works by funneling people into your movies, and then into your shows, and then into your books and all that. It's all about making money. But I would prefer to keep the two entities separate. And I think Ahsoka, again, is the current show that has the greatest potential to go ahead and start doing this. And then outside of that, you would have to like just completely give us new stuff that we don't have yet. And I think that's probably what's going to happen at some point in the future. So that's what I would do with a live action series. And now for the movies. So with the movies, and this is what I'm probably the most excited about, because Star Wars is best when it's at the movies. But what I would do here is, well, first of all, let's just go ahead and look at the movies we have. So, going way back, Dawn of the Jedi, that's going to be a movie that reportedly we're going to get. So it's going to be like a Force origin story is kind of what I'm picking up on. So, or at least, a Force origin for the Jedi. I think it would be weird if you don't have a Sith kind of plugging in there too. Otherwise, there's no tension. But we've got Dawn of the Jedi. We're getting a New Republic movie, assumption being that it's the Mandalorian movie. And then we're going to have a new Jedi Order movie with Rey. So, what would I do maybe within this construct, but also beyond this construct? So, we'll start within. So, Dawn of the Jedi, I'm not overly confident that Dawn of the Jedi is actually going to work? I'm really interested in that. I have a Star Wars YouTube channel. Odds are, if you're one of the few people watching this, you're probably pretty interested in it too, because you're like a hardcore Star Wars fans. But here's the secret to all of this entertainment deal, and it's not much of a secret, but if you're only getting the hardcore fans, you're not making a lot of money, right? Because yeah, there's a lot of us, but you want to sell to a lot more than just hardcore fans. And I'm not sure that Dawn of the Jedi quite does it. So, super interesting. Make that movie. Maybe it rocks and you can make more off of it. But if it doesn't, just leave it there and be like, hey, we explored it. Here's your story. And then we move forward. We have, looking way ahead, we have a new Jedi Order with Rey. I think that's interesting. I don't think that character was really done justice, if you will. It was not given a lot of justice in the way it was written, kind of promising in 7. Of course, complaints, people have complaints, but 7 wasn't a bad movie. So, kind of got some high hopes and then kind of goes downhill. So, New Jedi Order, at least it goes downhill in my opinion. But New Jedi Order, you have this story, and I think this probably has the greatest potential, if they do it right, to start a new Star Wars saga. So you launch it, right? So you've got this Jedi Order post sequel trilogy. You have Rey starting her own, and there's going to be some kind of conflict. There's going to be something that goes wrong. That's how these movies operate. And I think you want to go into that movie not with the idea of it being a standalone. I think you go into this movie first of all with an actual plan. So the sequel trilogy, not a good plan, right? Where you're just having a marathon race or relay race, handing off a baton to a different director. We saw how that went. You have a disjointed story. So I think, one, you actually make a plan for a trilogy with this Rey story. I think you make a compelling story out of this and you build it up. And man, if the movie is selling tickets and the fans are into it, make 6. Star Wars works as 6. We've seen it work. It's the greatest franchise of all time. So go ahead and make your plans for this. Big, complex story, long game. It would be so good to see, and then give this group of 6 movies. I think 9's probably a stretch because, as we saw, 9 turned into a stretch for a lot of people. So plan your own 6. If 9 is your idea, do it really well. Don't turn us into a Fast and Furious situation, but plan your 6, plan your 9, get your trilogies in, whatever. Span it out 10, 15, 20 years if you can make that work, and give us a very interesting story that is uniquely separate. We've got our original Star Wars films. We've got this new saga here. Call it the Rey saga or whatever you want to call it. If the first one's the Skywalker saga, I guess since Rey is a Skywalker, it would be the other Skywalker saga. But figure out something, right, and have your own little sections of Star Wars, if you will. Each one, obviously the original probably going to be the greatest ever, but give us a new long form storytelling that we go to the movie theater for, not just a Rogue One, as much as I love it, not just one thrown in here, not just a Solo there. Give us 3 movies, 6 movies, 9 movies telling a big story that one day, 20, 30 years from now, we're binge watching them all with kids and grandkids and talking about how great it is. That's what I would do with that Rey story. Now, there is one other interesting area that you could kind of make work. Not sure the logistics on it, like how they would make it work. I've touched on it a little, that it could be easiest in animation. It could be doable with deep fake in a series, but I think as far as the budget goes, because it's not cheap to do that deep fake thing, but what if Star Wars went out on a limb and they've already recast Han Solo, so maybe you only have to go out on two-thirds of a limb, but you recast Princess Leia, let it be Carrie Fisher's actual daughter. So recast her. Is Billy Lord? Is that her name? I could be wrong there. Let me know if I am. But recast Princess Leia. Recast Luke Skywalker. Get the blessing of Mark Hamill and recast him, and then tell an heir to the Empire story. So you've already got Thrawn there. We've got Ezra Bridger, Hera gearing up for whatever's coming next in this Thrawn story. Thrawn is set up as a bad guy. It doesn't appear that Ahsoka is going to be involved in this story anymore. So have your Mandalorian movie be your soft launch out of the Mandalorian, per se. Maybe get him back to a series. Maybe you kill off Mando. I don't know how that's going to work out. But going from there, and let that launch you into an heir to the Empire trilogy. It's what we want to see. It's what we would have preferred to have probably in S7, 8, and 9. Would have been super cool to see. But if you recast them, you could do this. Now, there'll be all kinds of drama, right? Like, oh, they're recasting the original cast. Can it be good? Can it whatever? Throw so much money in this. Have it be, big blockbuster explosions, action. Make sure there's some good story in there. Make Thrawn a very compelling villain. But my goodness, Luke Skywalker, Leia, Han Solo, that would sell movie tickets. So many. So give us an heir to the Empire story that, it gets us kind of from this Mandalorian story, wraps it up, and then maybe you can tell your First Order story after this. So wrap up this little, hey, the New Republic had this big war battle with Thrawn, and they survived it, and they came out strong, and then that's the story. But I do think an heir to the Empire movie, if Disney has the guts to do this, if they want to really spend to do this, and really devote, I would say, at least 8 years to it, because you're going to have a couple years of work before a movie, have one come out, and then years of work in between the movies. You're looking at 6 to 8 years of work on this one trilogy. Think it'd be cool to see. That would be the direction if it were me trying to tell good stories, trying to make a lot of money. That's all they're really trying to do is make a lot of money. Let's not kid ourselves. But I think that would be a really good way to do it. So you've got this heir story that's doing great with these characters we know. Then in this other timeline, way far ahead now, you've got this other trilogy doing its own thing, and people are excited about Star Wars again. And my goodness, maybe people are like excited about Rey and warmed up to her character. Like, everyone has come around to Hayden Christensen as Anakin. I grew up with the prequels, so I always liked Anakin, but that certainly wasn't the case. So maybe Rey has that warm reception later on, and you got a cool movie going there. You got your heir to the Empire. Maybe the Dawn of the Jedi stuff actually works. I hope it does, but not confident that it will. But maybe it does. So I don't know. With movies, that's what I would do, though. I would have my own series of films, not dependent on what's going on Disney Plus. I want these to be blockbusters that anyone and everyone can show up to. Don't need a lot of homework. You don't have to be, as soon as you get off work, binging all of these shows and paying subscriptions for it. Give us movies in the theater that play off the movies before it, and let's have this decade-long storytelling that happens in the movie theaters. I think you got to separate all that. I think that's going to be the best path going forward. So you've got your animated, kind of recapping all this. Your animated is filling in the gaps that, not overly important that we fill those gaps, but also it's like non-confrontational stories. Fill those in. Let your live action make Disney Plus its money, telling their own stories, and then bring Star Wars back to the box office. Independent movies that don't need all the Disney Plus background. Give us trilogies, give us decades of movies, and man, I think Star Wars is in a pretty strong spot if that's the way it goes. That's what I would do. Now, am I running it? Obviously not. I'm sitting in my home recording a podcast, and it will never make any shots like that. But as a fan, I think that would be super fun to see. So I think it's fun to theorize about these things. So again, in the comments, let me know what you would do if you were in charge of this big storytelling ordeal that Star Wars is. How would you go about the future of Star Wars? Otherwise, Kevin will be back next week. We did not have a falling out. Kevin will be back next week, and as advertised, we will be discussing our favorite Star Wars characters. We'll talk about why. So we're going to see who our favorite animated character is, our favorite live action series character, and then our favorite character from the movie. So it'll be fairly well structured, but definitely looking forward to that next week. Maybe there will be a few surprises on the list. Maybe it's not just going to be, oh, my favorite is Luke, and my favorite is Mando, and my favorite is whoever your favorite animated is. Maybe we have some curveballs to throw at you. So maybe not. You'll just have to show up and see. So I appreciate you taking the time to watch or listen to this today, and we'll catch you next week.